Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. NFL season is almost here. 5 weeks until kickoff. Fanduel released their salaries late last night. It was under the cover of night. I wasn't even expecting it. Somebody on Twitter said, hey, the salaries are out. And I posted the Bruce Arians gift. I was shocked. So I sat there and I took a glance at it and I decided I'm going to do a way too early Fanduel first look lineup for the week 1 NFL kickoff. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. I can't wait for this. This is my favorite thing. I'm glad to be able to get back to doing some DFS content for NFL. I'm absolutely geeked. If you're as excited as I am, leave me a note in the comments. Let me know who you think is are the best value plays on this slate at first glance. Obviously, things can massively change over the next 5 weeks with the pandemic going on. Players getting COVID could miss 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Injuries that will always happen throughout camp. There could be some extra values that pop up between now, and there will be extra values that pop up between now and between week 1 kickoff 5 weeks from now. But let me know who at first glance for you are the guys that pop as the best values. As always, like this video. Appreciate you guys being here once again. Welcome back. Please, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Be sure to ring that notifications bell because I'm going to be coming out with a ton of content in the lead up, the march toward NFL season, and every single week we're going to have about 6 to 8 videos that come out. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at this FanDuel first look. The first thing I noticed is that Christian McCaffrey is 10K, and rightfully so. He deserves it. And going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, the Raiders who are not being able to play at the Roomba for week 1. If you haven't noticed, their stadium looks like a giant Roomba in Vegas, right there off the strip. Christian McCaffrey's a lock, whether they're at home, whether they're on the road, whether they're favored, whether they're, playing from ahead, playing from behind. He's game flow independent. He's going to get his, and he could reach value on volume alone, or pay off that salary and get you a high enough point total on volume alone, as opposed to having to score touchdowns to get there, where some other players definitely have to do that, especially on FanDuel, where it's only a half-point PPR, as opposed to DraftKings, where we usually do content where it's a full point PPR, and easier for cheaper players or more expensive players who are getting a lot of volume to reach it. The next thing I noticed is Lamar Jackson at quarterback, priced way ahead of the field, and rightfully so, because when you roster Lamar Jackson, you're not just getting a quarterback, you're also getting an RB1 on every single slate, or the potential of an RB1 on every single slate. 28 FanDuel points per game last year, absolutely absurd. Going up against Cleveland and Baltimore as 9-point favorites, do have the highest team total or implied team total on the first week slate. There's other quarterbacks in play as well. Russ Wilson against Atlanta in a game that could shoot out at 8,400. Drew Brees going up against Tampa Bay, good history for him there, and playing in the Dome at 8,100. And the pricing at quarterback on FanDuel is very condensed. When we get to like 8,000 to 7,000, basically every other quarterback on the slate just exists in this range, which for tournaments makes stacking extremely viable, as it is always, but like very possible for you to stack any quarterback with a wide receiver, combination of pass catchers, and bring it back with one other player on the other team. So guys like Josh Allen, you can stack Diggs against the Jets, and he's got the running possibility as well, as we've seen from him in the last couple of years. Matt Ryan in that game that could very possibly shoot out for 7,800. Carson Wentz going against Washington, who was a sieve last year on defense, with some very attractive pass catchers that are not priced up, as we'll get to later in this video. And it's a condensed target tree, so you pretty much know where the volume is going to go. Kyler Murray with the rushing ability he has, but going up against San Francisco, probably an avoid for me in week 1. At his price, right? Not an avoid for me as a player. I like him as a player, but really tough defense that they're going up against. And at the price that he's at, I'm just not buying. Now, look, he could make me look really silly 5 weeks from now, but that just kind of is what it is. Matthew Stafford, I expect this team to take a big leap forward in terms of their offense with Stafford there. Cam Newton, one of my favorites every single week that I've ever played DFS. I try to find ways to get Cam Newton into tournaments, and now we have the ability to stack him with an Edelman or a N'Keal Harry at 7,300, and then on down. Paying down at quarterback is an extremely viable strategy in daily fantasy. It is an extremely viable strategy on DraftKings, where there is a large variance between the high dollar quarterbacks and the low dollar quarterbacks. But I don't think there's enough of a gap between all these QBs down in here, at least the way that FanDuel prices the rest of the slate, with depressed prices at wide receiver at my first glance, a very attractive tight end value that I think is out there who could exceed on volume alone without him finding his way into the end zone, although there is the possibility that he could find his way into the end zone, and defenses which we're just going to settle in somebody around 4K. So I'm going to plug Lamar Jackson, and I'm going to see what else we can do. Moving on to running back, the most glaring value on the slate for me exists here at running back in terms of the volume that you're going to get from this player, their involvement in the passing game. Now, granted, it's not full PPR, but every half point does matter. And his volume should increase this year. We're going to get to him as we scroll down, and you're going to see how much of a value he is versus the high-priced guys. Christian McCaffrey at 10K. You want to squeeze him? Go ahead. I'm not against it. You can definitely make it work. Okay, you're going to have to find a value at tight end. You're going to have to find an extra value at wide receiver or a super value at wide receiver. I'll give you an option for that as well. You could go Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey. You might have to settle for a value quarterback to be able to get Christian McCaffrey in there. But I think that there's some running backs that can do not similar things to McCaffrey. But based on where he's priced, 1,300 above the next highest running back, which is Dalvin Cook against Green Bay, who gave up chunks of yards to running backs last year. Alvin Kamara facing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay is still going to have a really tough run defense. We saw what he did to them last year, where he did not really run the ball effectively against them, right? 16 rushes for 62, but he did have 6 catches. Probably more attractive to me in week 1 on DraftKings when we see what his price is going to be, especially if they still adjust for pricing versus that defense. If his price is depressed, you can get him at an elevated target count against this Tampa, or expected elevated target count against that Tampa Bay defense. More attractive to me in full PPR than half PPR. Josh Jacobs should see more volume this year and is somebody that I kind of want to roster in week 1 because Carolina's defense was already bad last year and they've lost pieces this year, Kuechly retiring, and it's going to be a horrific defense. Carolina is going to be a team that we stack in tournaments. You're going to play their players because we know what we can get out of DJ Moore. We know what we can get out of Christian McCaffrey in 2020. I think Teddy Bridgewater is fine at quarterback and is usually going to be cheap and somebody that we can attack. I wouldn't mind him here in week 1 either if you're building a tournament stack with him, but their defense is so bad that you should see a potential for a shootout every single week. And Josh Jacobs, if he sees more carries, if he sees more targets, especially because he did not get targeted that often, or he didn't get targeted frequently and did not get targeted consistently in the passing game. Now there's this narrative that his coach wants to make everybody realize that he should have been the rookie of the year last year. So there's the coach's revenge narrative possible here this season with Josh Jacobs. Anyway, Carolina is a terrible defense and you're going to want to play players against them, but I think he's priced appropriately at 8,200. Looking down a little bit, Austin Eckler going up against Cincinnati on the road. I like Eckler as a player, as a person. I think that he's going to see a ton of volume this year versus before. I don't see him in the 25 touch range per game, but if he gets 17 to 20 touches with 4 to 5 of those coming through the air every single week and gets some of the goal line work, because I don't foresee him getting all of the goal line work, there's going to be weeks that he pays off. I don't like where he's priced, especially on FanDuel at half PPR for week 1. He'll be in my tournament allocations, but he's not somebody that I want to consider for like a single entry or a cash game lineup that I'm trying to build here for this way too early first look. I'm looking for as much value as I can get. And at 7,700, he doesn't really present that. But as I scroll down here to 6,800, Miles Sanders absolutely stands out at 6,800 with the volume increase that he should see coming into this season, regardless of the coach speak, right? I'm not expecting him to get 22 carries, right? But he doesn't need to get that. If he gets 15 to 18 carries in this offense every single week, which is essentially what he did late in the season, 17 carries against Miami, 15 against the Giants, 19 against Washington, 20 here, 9 against the Giants here, and 14 against Seattle in the playoffs. But targets 5, 5, 6, 6, 5, 5. You're going to get massive volume from a player at 6,800 who could exceed his value on volume alone. And if he sneaks his way into the end zone against a horrific Washington football team defense, I think this salary is just wrong, right? I just think he is priced incorrectly and will probably end up being one of the highest owned players on the slate. So we're going to plug Miles Sanders in there. Looking for another value running back because we're going to have to find some another value here that we can go with. There's a few ways that we can go, but Raheem Mostert, with the volume that he was getting at the end of the season and the matchup here against Arizona, playing at home in a game where they are massively favored, we're not going to get much in the passing game from him. And I understand if you don't want to play him because you're not going to get that cushion. 1 to 2 catches max from Raheem Mostert, but only 6,200 with a high touchdown expectation in week 1 and on a team that should be able to run the ball amazingly well. Sits in at only 6,200. We'll get to flex later. Moving on to wide receiver, Michael Thomas against Tampa Bay and Michael Thomas at home are two things that we can just bank on. And at 8,800, I like the salary for him here better than I like the salary at 10K for Christian McCaffrey. So Michael Thomas is somebody that I'm definitely considering in this spot. New Orleans has the second or the third highest implied point total, team total on the week, and Michael Thomas going to be heavily involved. 10 to 15 targets expected pretty much anytime he steps onto the field, and higher efficiency when him and Breeze are playing in the dome. Julio Jones, he's great in a game that projects to shoot out. If you want to stack this Seattle Atlanta game, one of the higher totals on the slate at, what is it at right now? 49. Granted, we're 5 weeks out. And only a 1-point favorite is the Seattle Seahawks. So if you want to stack that game, it's very possible to stack it with multiple options from both teams and one of the quarterbacks. Not really interested in Godwin and Evans at this price for this lineup unless you're stacking that game or building a Tampa Bay centric lineup, or bringing it back if you're building a New Orleans centric lineup, Breeze to Kamara and Thomas, and bringing it back with one of these guys. I'd be more okay with that if that's what you're doing for a single entry tournament or a 100-man tournament here on FanDuel, which are the games that I really like. Those games, the $5, $10, $25, $100 100-man tournaments where they pay the top 12. I put a variation of a cash game lineup in those, more tournament oriented, maybe a little bit more stack oriented, or quarterback, wide receiver, and one player from another team with best values in slot and the rest of the places throughout that lineup. I like the way that those games play and pay out. So when you hit a big lineup, your return on investment is pretty high in those. But looking down here in the 6K and below range, 7K and below range is where you're going to find the best values on the slate. In my opinion, 5 weeks out, here, Odell Beckham against Baltimore. I understand if you want to avoid him, especially with the recent comments. Everybody's going to write their own narratives for what they want to believe. Oh, he doesn't want to play. He's not going to be there. He's not going to give effort. Whatever. I'm not getting into that. To me, I think that there are better values a little bit cheaper. Tyler Lockett. There are two guys on Seattle that get the majority of the targets. Tyler Lockett, the more expensive of the two at 6,800. Both of them get targeted well in the red zone, and Tyler Lockett for his size gets a lot of end zone targets. But for me, looking at both of these guys, I prefer DK Metcalf for 400 cheaper. Led the league last year in terms of end zone targets. That does not seem like it's going to change. Wide receivers do tend to make a leap in year 2. That doesn't always manifest itself in week 1, but I've already spoken about how this game might shoot out. And if 50 to 60% of the targets from Russ Wilson that game are going to go towards DK Metcalf plus Tyler Lockett, and the majority of the red zone and end zone targets, the end zone targets being the highest leverage targets that you're going to get from a wide receiver, DK Metcalf at 6,400, somebody that I am 100% going to be targeting at this price. Similar price, Terry McLaurin. Spoke about him on a previous video, if talking about the draft day values, guys that I thought were really great prices in ADP. He's a really great price on FanDuel in week 1. There is nobody else in Washington for them to throw the ball to. And we saw McLaurin post some really monster games last year. The price that he's at here is just too low, in my opinion. The targets should go up. The catches should go up. The game-breaking ability is still there. And it's a player now going into his second year where they're going to be playing from behind a ton. And at 6,500, I absolutely love this price against a team in Philadelphia whose cornerbacks have struggled at stopping wide receivers, both short, mid-range, and long. This is definitely a spot where Terry McLaurin can eat at 6,500. DJ Chark, if you want to chase garbage time points, I'm fine with that. Spoke about Stephon Diggs. If you're targeting the Buffalo offense here, they're always going to have a lower team total. He's not going to get the volume, in my opinion, as some of these other guys. We saw John Brown get off on really good volume last year. And if Josh Allen can be more accurate, or at least for one game be really accurate, Steph Diggs is going to have chances down the field where he has won more than most wide receivers for the past 3 seasons. And an outstanding deep threat. Calvin Ridley at 6,600 as well. But for me at 5,900, I want to stack Lamar Jackson's most dynamic target down the field, and that's Marquise Brown. Obviously, Mark Andrews is going to be a higher priced guy. He is going to get more end zone looks and more red zone looks than Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown now reported to have added 20 plus pounds of muscle. You can debate whether that is positive or negative. He's now up to 180 pounds. He's still going to be a burner, right? It's not, well, he's 180 pounds. Maybe now he's going to be slow. This guy can fly. All right. So adding that sort of muscle, he's going to still be faster than most guys that he faces. And with the fact that Baltimore against Cleveland has the highest team total on the slate, he can get it done for you in one play if his volume increases, if his snap count increases from last year, which I believe that it will. And that may not manifest itself completely in week 1. But with them being projected to score 29 to 30 points, if Marquise Brown gets me 7 or 8 targets in week 1, if he gets me 6 targets in week 1, the chances for one of those being a 40-yard catch or more is way too high that if he sneaks behind a defense with everything that Lamar Jackson and the rest of the running game on that offense can do, Marquise Brown might get there from deep, and at 5,900 still leaves me with 6,200 for a tight end and a flex. We're going to plug in a defense around 4,000. Who did I have here in the thing? I had the Chargers. Fine. Good defense against a rookie quarterback, whatever. Plug him in. We'll worry more about the defense as we get closer to week 1. I'm not going to stress on that. Tight end. The flowchart defense from last year, the Arizona Cardinals, did draft a linebacker to try and solve or shore up their inability to defend opposing tight ends. Maybe it'll be effective. Maybe it won't. It could be a scheme issue, not just a personnel issue. It could be a little from column A and a little from column B. They should be improved, but improved could mean that they go from being the 32nd and by a long shot, right? They were the worst team against tight ends last year, and it wasn't even close. They were in a tier all by themselves. Tier 2 was empty, and tier 3 is where the next worst teams started to slide in. So if they slide down and they're like, hey, we've seen massive improvement against tight ends, and they're like the 27th defense against tight ends this year based on the personnel changes, George Kittle should eat. My issue for this sort of a lineup is that George Kittle is priced in a range where he's prohibitive versus getting you a higher volume wide receiver at a similar price, or a higher volume running back, definitely a higher volume running back at a similar or cheaper price. I love the matchup. I will play him in tournaments. He will be in my allocations. And when I say that, it's not a cop-out, right? There's a lot of people that when they do content, they're like, well, yeah, sure, he's a GPP play. I typically play, if I remember correctly, 50 to 60 players across 150 lineups on any one weekend. So I'm not trying to cover every base. I'm not trying to hit every player. I'm not saying, well, he's either a cash game play or everybody else on the slate is a GPP play. There are definitely plays that I will fade completely and not have any shares of because you physically can't cover every single base. There's too many players to play. So I want to try and overweight the field on the players that I like and not just have one lineup out of 150 that has that one guy in it. I will definitely have shares of George Kittle in lineups that are crafted around having George Kittle in them. But this ain't the one. Mark Andrews could have been the guy that I go with here. Tight end is such a high variance lineup spot if you're not getting the super high volume guys. And Andrews got good volume, though he didn't run a whole lot of routes if you compare him to those other guys. Obviously, it's easier to get targets if you're not pass blocking, if you're actually out there running a route on dropbacks from your quarterback. Kittle runs a ton of routes, even though he is a great run blocker. and pass blocker. He runs a ton of routes. Darren Waller, one of the highest in the league. Zach Ertz at 6,600 versus 74 for Andrews at 8,000 for Kittle is way more attractive to me at his salary, at his price point, knowing the amount of targets that he's going to see in week 1 against the Washington defense that's horrible. And that's why I'm saying George Kittle isn't my guy for this lineup, or Mark Andrews isn't my guy for this lineup. Now, sure, if I wanted to double stack Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, and bring it back with one of the players, whether it's going to be Landry or Kareem Hunt, one of the pass catchers, Landry, Kareem Hunt, or Odell Beckham Jr. on Cleveland, that would be a route that you could go in a lineup that is specifically made to do that, and I'm fine with that and signing off on it. But for this lineup, not the route that I want to go. Zach Ertz was somebody that I would be interested in, but I can't get to the flex that I want if I pay up here at 5,600. So for me, I'm looking for volume. I'm looking for a player that should be involved in the pass game on a team that will pass a lot. And for me, at this price point, at 5,200, it's Hayden Hurst stepping into that Austin Hooper role in the Atlanta Falcons offense that we know will pass the ball a lot. He should be third on this team in targets behind Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, but that's enough to eat. And I don't think that we're going to see his price stay around this 5,200 range for very, very long during 2020, because if he's getting 6 targets a week, which is not that much, right? I'm not over projecting when I think that Hayden Hurst could get me 6 targets a week, 3 to 4 catches a week, with the possibility of a touchdown with how heavily they've used their tight ends once they get inside the 10-yard line and with their end zone targets. Hayden Hurst at 5,200 presents himself to me as the best value tight end on the slate, and caveats being we're 5 weeks before the season and everything can change, especially during COVID, which leaves us 9,400 for a flex. If you want to change something, you go ahead. You want to find that extra 600 to get up to Christian McCaffrey, I'm totally okay with that. For me, I'm taking Michael Thomas in the Dome against Tampa Bay, a team that he has lit up pretty much every time that he's played him. Give me those 10 to 15 targets. Give me those end zone, red zone targets. Give me the 100+ yards from scrimmage, and I'll take that to the bank with the possibility of a 30-point day. With a floor of probably around 17 points on Fanduel with half-point PPR. So Lamar Jackson, Miles Sanders, Mo Stair, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Marquise Brown, Hayden Hurst for value. Michael Thomas is going to be my flex anchor, and a random $4,200 defense, giving us plenty of money to spend if we wanted to upgrade that defense around the main day, or if we wanted to change out these running backs. There is another value running back if you wanted to look at him in Jonathan Taylor. If you want to try and get up to Michael Thomas, he's in like the 5,000 range, like 5,400 for Indy. If you feel he's going to get 15 plus touches, 5,400 is just way too cheap, and that'll allow you to get up from Michael Thomas to Christian McCaffrey if that is the route that you want to go. Thank you guys for joining, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.
He's a legend.